Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we are back to Hearthstone. So we barely covered any conversation topics and yet somehow got 4 victories with the Shaman. Almost have finished this and only need to play 50 rogue cards otherwise. So let's hop back into our ranked play. We're getting up on ranked with our overload deck, which is working rather well. And let's start talking about some topics. So, the ZeniMax Oculus trial apparently was set for 3 weeks, and they somehow actually ran it in 3 weeks. I don't really understand that, but I guess is it somehow in these civil lawsuits the judges can limit cases more than they can seem to do it in criminal cases, because it seems like these things just happen. Anyways, the jury award after 3 weeks have said ZeniMax gets $500 million from Oculus for Palmer Luckey breaking his NDA, but found that Oculus did not misappropriate trade secrets. Now, so then Oculus comes back and says, well, we're not really super happy with everything that happened in this instance. It does go to say that Oculus products are Oculus products. I heard someone talking about this case, and they were saying John Carmack instead of Palmer Luckey. The article I said didn't seem to mention John Carmack. Palmer Luckey is the guy in charge of Oculus, or was at least a big guy in Oculus before they hid him away for funding Trump, which certainly that decision's only going to come back and bite him in the butt even more.
Death does not scare me.
So I don't know how John Carmack plays in there, whether he is another important character in the in Oculus, or if there's some other factor that in fact, I think I just saw an article too saying John Carmack didn't copy any of the thing. Oh, maybe Palmer Luckey was the person they brought in that didn't actually work for ZeniMax. Maybe John Carmack was the guy that worked for ZeniMax, and Palmer Luckey was. They were saying that Palmer Luckey was the person who they are pretending like invented the Oculus Rift when they're saying ZeniMax. Anyways, if this ruling stands, which it's more than likely gonna get appealed by Oculus on some grounds, and ZeniMax is going to try and seek an injunction to stop Oculus's sales, which seems highly unlikely to actually work, considering the jury has already said that they didn't believe trade secrets were misappropriated. I don't know why they specifically used the phrase misappropriated instead of stolen, but whatever. So yeah, ZeniMax is still going to try and screw over Oculus and stop sales of the Oculus Rift, and Oculus is still going to try to not pay that $500 million. The one thing about the $500 million is it breaks down into breaking an NDA and I think a couple of other things. One of the things was specifically that somebody at some point Googled how to erase a hard drive, and that got recorded, and so there's some thought of perhaps destruction of evidence, but again, I think John Carmack came out and said he didn't do it, so Yeah, I'm very confused on who Palmer Luckey and Joel Kamek. I need a chart here. This is too complicated a thing and potentially slanderous to say the wrong thing. Also, so I am definitely not in a good position, regardless of how this thing works. Right, this and this. That. And in return, another interesting thing. Speaking of Palmer Luckey, which I wrote down this list, so I actually know who I'm talking about in this story. There is this new podcast or thing coming out. It's kind of like a, I don't think it's a podcast as much as it is a video series. I don't think I'm gonna win here, but whatever. Called Unlocked the World of Games, and it's apparently hosted by several different people for several different videos, so it's kind of this almost anthology documentary where there's no central line connecting the interviewer or the interviewee, which means it's probably going to be total and complete garbage. But there's more evidence that it'll be total and complete garbage than just that, because it is, it's called Unlock the World of Games Revealed. There's several commas here. It's full of huge egos, such as Palmer Luckey, exactly as Palmer Luckey, because it is Palmer Luckey is one of the persons, and Randy Pitchford, and Bill Shatner, one of the biggest egos I've ever seen, although frankly that is from afar, so honestly probably my real life I've run into bigger egos, but maybe not in Bill Shatner's case. You may also see a trend here that while Palmer Luckey and Randy Pitchford are big names in the video game industry, they probably don't have anything that new or special to say in the video game industry. Randy Pitchford's the CEO of Gearbox, sure, but does he really have anything that special? Did Randy Pitchford make any games? Did he work on anything? I don't even know. I'm not sure. Did Palmer Luckey do anything special? Not yet, really. If he invented the Oculus Rift, which let's say he did, since the court just said he did, is that really that special? Not really. The VR is still a very fledgling thing that probably in 4 or 5 years will be as gone, in my opinion, as 3D TVs are gone now. But wait, there's more. Kevin Smith, huge ego, doesn't really know anything special, frankly, about much of anything. Likes to get stoned, has his own podcast where he gets high. I watched his latest movie that was a gift to his daughter Zelda, of hockey. What were they called? They were called hockey Canadian Canucks or something. I don't know. It was trying to be like Clerks with his two daughters, and it sucked really bad, and it had them fighting a giant half sausage, half Nazi creature, I think. I fast forwarded through it. Kevin Smith doesn't know anything about video games. Penn Jillette absolutely doesn't know anything about video games, doesn't play them, doesn't. I mean, he can talk about Desert Buzz, which he had somebody make, but he's not an authority, and he's a big ego too. And Penn Jillette is going to be an interviewer, and almost certainly he's going to interview Randy Pitchford, who's his friend. Now Penn Jillette is also promoting Nordvania Cafe, which is Randy Pitchford's wife's brother, so his brother-in-law's cafe. So there's still some very, very much not admitting hashtag sponsored content happening between the two, which the FDC should, I think it's the FTC should definitely investigate, but who knows if they will have any authority or any reason to do that now under the new presidency. Cliff Bleszinski, huge ego, and kind of also out of the video game industry. I mean, sure, he kind of came back, but I don't know if I particularly want him in there. If I was gonna be elitist and kick people out of the video game industry that I actually thought were in it, I would say Randy Pitchford, Cliff Bleszinski. The industry would probably be better without you being here. So go away and don't come back. But even Cliff Bleszinski himself left the market for a while. Tom Arnold. I don't believe Tom Arnold knows anything about video games either. If I was just to guess, I believe Tom Arnold may have voice acted in a video game or two, and that's about it. But I think they're going to get Shigeru Miyamoto. Now, if we want to say Shigeru Miyamoto has a huge ego, I would say it has, him being Japanese, it has to be a Japanese huge ego. Which, since he stands out and acts odd, and is very different than your standard salary man in Japan, is very subtle and conciliatory. I bet if you ask the Japanese person, they would probably say he has a huge ego from a different perspective. And certainly he's made all the Mario games, so all these people certainly have succeeded despite themselves and deserve the big ego. But boy, does this video series sound like a pain to actually think about watching. Does not sound fun at all. Fortunately, I don't really have a reason why I have to watch it, even though I almost certainly will. But it's just, man. In it, last time I saw William Shatner in something, well, actually no. The second to last time I saw William Shatner on something, it was horrible. It was the Captain's get together, where he was interviewing all of the captains of the different Star Trek series, and it was so centered around himself being Captain Kirk. It was so focused on that. It was awful. However, shockingly, the next thing he was in charge of was about the original Star Trek. No, it was about the Next Generation series, which he had nothing really to do with. And yeah, and he stayed shockingly out of it. He interviewed himself. He did the interviews, and either there was a excellent editor that was cutting out all of the times that Bill Shatner would then go on for 5 minutes and talk about himself and just get to the actual responses of the person who he asked the question to, because I wouldn't be surprised if it was Bill Shatner asked the question and then got a response from somebody, and then he probably responded to that response for 5 minutes and talked to him. And see, that's how you would have it in a normal conversation, but that's not what you're trying to do when you're doing an interview. So if there was some great editor in, I think it was called Trouble on the Bridge, then that editor deserves an award in doing a great job. Otherwise, Bill Shatner learned somehow to be less obnoxious, and I find that surprising. There's also kind of a sad story with Bill Shatner because he finally, either whether it's a real diagnosis or not, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but he said that the reason why his face looks so bloated now is not just that he's fat, but that he had a medical condition that caused him to move fast and act nervously too. So, I don't know if I fully believe it or not, but whatever. If he wants to blame his past mistakes on the medical conditions, that's one thing, but then he needs to also to recognize it once it was diagnosed and actually act against it. You can't just say you're an alcoholic, therefore that's why you're always sleeping around with other women. You have to say you're an alcoholic, therefore you stop drinking alcohol and you stop being unfaithful. That was a poor comparison. I should have said he was a sexaholic if I was going to use the excuse of sleeping around with other women, which, by the way, is not an actual medical condition. You cannot be addicted to sex because, simply placed, there's nothing that physically goes wrong when you have sex. There's nothing physically bad that happens to you. Therefore, it's not that. You can have an obsessive or an addictive personality, certainly, and you can obsess and be addicted to any number of things, whether it's chewing on pins or twirling your hair or anything. But the idea that you're actually addicted to sex is a made-up thing that people put on themselves or wives put on their husbands because they're just repressed.
Hello, friend.
No true psychologist would ever give that diagnosis, and you can look up in the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual, Volume 5, which is what I believe they're up to right now, and see that it is not listed at all. That's the DSM-5 if you want to Google it.
Tide
fact,
rises.
Moving on though. Denuvo, the anti-cracking, not DRM software. How would they pronounce saying what they were? They were the anti-tamper software because for games was cracked in Resident Evil 7 in 1 week. Now, from the speculation I've heard, Denuvo makes a different encoding mechanism key for every game, and so it's very possible that that they just dropped the ball on this one, but it's a big ball drop. RE7, hugely well-selling game. Somebody was talking about just win or don't win. Don't sit here and make noise. Someone's talking about the evil within. Total Biscuit was, and I haven't even gotten through all of his podcasts yet. But nobody on the panel, 4 people, could even remember the Evil Within, which is barely 1 year old now. So, and that's probably the last AAA horror game to come out. Now, the Evil Within in itself had some major problems because instead of telling a consistent story, it was bouncing around the player into many like random areas, and it was all supposed to be in the head of somebody or something like that. I'm not sure I ever got the full story there. And I do want to cover the Evil Within, but I also kind of am thinking to myself, yeah, who cares now? Like nobody would watch a series of me covering the Evil Within until the Evil Within 2 was about to come out. And if I'm gonna pick either, I'd pick RE7 since everybody has been pretty consistent about it being a great game. There's a slight complaint, I would say, and a valid complaint about just wooden doors stopping the player everywhere, and simple single pane glass stopping the player from escaping the building. You really have to suspend your disbelief a lot. Let's see, 8 more cards. If I could only get them to draw about 25 more cards, I'd win. But to get back to Denuvo being cracked in 1 week, their response was by far the most pathetic thing ever. And it will be interesting to see if we find that Denuvo gets taken out in a few months. I wouldn't be surprised if they leave it in there for a little bit. But I really wouldn't be surprised if it gets taken out and we find that the RE7 runs even better. But anyways, their response to it being cracked was about the most pathetic you could make. I think their public response should have probably been, this is a great tragedy, and this is undoubtedly going to hurt sales of a great game like RE7, and we were going to double down our efforts to improve upon our system, which we know there's no such thing as an uncrackable program, which is one of the things they said as an excuse. It's like, well, we never said it was uncrackable in the first place. And it's like, okay, yeah, but 1 week, really? We still have we look forward to a good continued relationship with Capcom, and we're going to do everything to stand by our customer and help them as much as possible. Piracy is still illegal. Please do not pirate this game. This game is excellent and deserves your support. And then talk about how good the game is. Put it all in the game. Really use all of that as your flag to wave to say, you're a bad guy if you crack this game. This is totally... please don't do this. Rah, 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 rah. And then you just try to hide the fact that the Denuvo is cracked. But instead they said, on top of saying, well, we never said it was uncrackable, is, well, games that don't have any anti-tamper, or DRM are cracked immediately. So their argument they're trying to make is Denuvo is worth at minimum 7 days of protected sales. And that's not true at all, because games that don't have any DRM, things you get on good old games or something like that, are not cracked immediately. They are in fact never cracked, because there's no reason to crack them. If there's no DRM, if there's no digital rights management or concern on who owns what, then there's no reason to crack them. You just copy that file, copy that floppy anywhere, and that's not cracking a game. That's just whatever. I suppose I understand what they're trying to say, but the right way to say it would have been games without any DRM are copied immediately and stolen immediately. And I think they probably should pound stolen every time, because that's the perspective they would want the consumer to look at it. As, but it is the most pathetic argument ever. They didn't bother to highlight any of their previous successes, because Denuvo, for the past couple of years, has kept a few of the games really, really locked up from being cracked. Like Dragon Age, I believe one of the Dragon Age games was locked up behind Denuvo for months and months and months, and they were saying for a time that it's gonna be almost impossible, or it's impossible to crack games with Denuvo, and it's gone from that to just nope, it's totally easy, not a problem at all. You don't need to. We'll have this available a week after the game comes out for anybody that wants to play it. Now, on the cracking thing, personally, even though I'm not making any real money on this YouTube channel or any income from it, it's still easier for me through generous benefactor to buy things on Steam sales and have it in the Steam library and all of that than it is to go to the ever increasingly dangerous and flooded with ads pirate sites and try to get a pirate copy of something. With Windows 10 being relatively free, it gets down to like almost no software is crackable is even worth trying to get. Like there's a few scenarios I could see it. If you are a professional if you're a student entering the field, and for instance, your college isn't giving you free versions of Adobe Photoshop if you're getting into either graphics design or photography, which your college should be giving you copies of that for free, and most of them do. Or at the very least, you've got a guy that's already got a CD ready to go walking around the campus. Then I could see you going to a pirate site and getting those softwares. But they either give you great discounts when you're in college and you can get it for free, which often the student editions that they're trying to sell aren't actually any good anyways, though. So you might still be better off getting the Windows 10 Professional Ultimate Edition than some Windows 10 Basic Starter Student Edition, or an Adobe Lite version versus the normal things. I screwed up there. Oh well. It's, I could see that, but by the time you're actually hired in the profession, your employer should be giving you software unless you're a contractor, and if you're a contractor, being a contractor is probably not a good idea for your first job out of college. So more and more it just stops being realistic. There's many scenarios in the Western United States world and Western world to even bother and spend the effort to pirate things. Kids trying to get more games are about the only people I could see, and I can be sympathetic to that, certainly, because just the large amount of expense comparatively versus the zero amount of income that kids have often. Like, even though I don't make $10, but maybe in 10 weeks of making videos, still as an adult, $10 to me feels like nothing, where $10 to me when I was a kid would have been a major amount, even if you adjusted that down to about $5. Even $5 would have been a major amount to me as a kid.
This isn't Moonblade.
But if Denuvo really has a couple more failures under its belt, which undeniably this was a huge failure, I wouldn't be surprised if the video game industry just says forget it. We don't need to slow down our games and install Denuvo and integrate Denuvo and pay for Denuvo when it's not really going to do us anything anyways. Interestingly enough, I still haven't gotten but halfway through my list of things to talk about, and now we're at episode 3. Well, we will be at episode 3 in the next recording. So we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll just make an episode 4. I can't really do another arena run. I can't afford it. So I would just have to play ranked. We'll see what happens. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on basically any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.